Welcome back to Left, Labor Education for today. This is the weekly recap. In our first story of the week, UPS and the Teamsters have reached a tentative agreement ahead of the July 31st contract expiration date. At this point, it would be malpractice for me not to mention that the Teamsters and UPS have finally reached a tentative agreement for contract negotiations ahead of the anticipated July 31st contract expiration date. The Teamsters and Teamster General President Sean O'Brien are hailing this agreement as a game-changing contract for UPS workers, as well as a historic agreement that's going to set the tone for the labor movement across the U.S.
I'm proud to say we reached a historic deal with UPS. We've made so many improvements in this contract, all for the benefit of our members. Tremendous victory. It's a tremendous victory for labor.
Meanwhile, UPS is also happy about the deal, saying, "Together, we reached a win-win-win agreement on the issues that are important to Teamsters leadership, our employees, and to UPS and our customers. This agreement continues to reward UPS's full and part-time employees with industry-leading pay and benefits while retaining the flexibility we need to stay competitive, serve our customers, and keep our business strong." Even President Biden weighed in on the deal, saying, "This agreement is a testament to the power of employers and employees coming together to work out their differences at the bargaining table in a manner that helps businesses succeed while helping workers secure pay and benefits that they can raise a family on and retire with dignity and respect." And although a lot of ground was made in these contract negotiations between the Teamsters and UPS, the final sticking point came down to those part-time workers who UPS insisted were not being paid an appropriate wage based on the amount of profits that UPS has earned over the last few years. Specifically, the Teamsters said that part-time employees could make as little as $15.50 an hour, and that figure is immediately going up to $21 an hour upon ratification of the contract, with additional increases to $23 an hour by the end of the contract cycle. And speaking of contract cycle, the duration for this tentative agreement is 5 years, which I'm sure makes UPS very happy to know that they will not need to worry about these negotiations for at least the next few years. However, they're not quite in the clear just yet. Technically, workers need to approve of the tentative agreement through a ratification vote. However, I do not anticipate that that's going to be a concern, as the Teamsters General Bargaining Committee has unanimously supported the tentative agreement, recommending a yes vote for all Teamster represented employees. And in our second story of the week, American Airlines has reached a tentative agreement with the Allied Pilots Association, while flight attendants from the same airline have failed to see the same progress. On Thursday, American Airlines and the Allied Pilots Association announced that the parties have reached a tentative agreement over the contract negotiations representing pilots of American Airlines. And according to the union, the deal reflects similar increases and benefits as those achieved by pilots from Delta as well as United Airlines. And the agreement leaves Southwest Airlines pilots as the last of the big four U.S. airlines to be without a tentative agreement. And you may recall a story from a few weeks ago on Southwest Airlines pilots and their decision to request release from federal mediation in order that they could proceed with the next step in the strike authorization process to move one step closer to that work stoppage. And speaking of work stoppages, the flight attendants at American Airlines have recently initiated a strike authorization vote of their own, with the results expected to come at the end of August 2023.
Good morning. Yeah, the Association for Professional Flight Attendants represents 26,000 flight attendants with American Airlines. They will begin voting today through August 29th. Those results will be announced on August 30th, after which the union plans to start pickets at bases across the country. Some of the issues flight attendants at American Airlines want to see addressed include cost of living increases, scheduling improvements, and a return to pre-pandemic staffing levels.
However, just like the pilots from Southwest Airlines, the flight attendants from American Airlines are also subject to the Railway Labor Act, which means that there are several procedural steps between a strike authorization vote and the realization of a strike by workers, as employees would need to go through that federal mediation process, then would need to request a release from mediation when negotiations have stalled. and then 30 days after that, as part of a cooling off period, flight attendants at American Airlines would only then be able to go on strike. So unbelievably, according to the union, American Airlines flight attendants have not gotten a raise since January 2019, which is pretty hard to believe considering that that was a full year prior to the start of the pandemic. And again, still several procedural steps away from the ability to go on strike as they continue contract negotiations with their employer. And in our final story of the week, the National Labor Relations Board reaffirmed its intent to update the joint employer rule as soon as next month, August 2023. Since the fall of 2022, the National Labor Relations Board has telegraphed its intent to publish a final rule pertaining to what constitutes a joint employer under the National Labor Relations Act. For almost a decade now, the standard for what constitutes a joint employer in the United States has been in flux as the changing composition of the National Labor Relations Board has aligned with a changing interpretation of that joint employer standard. To put it simply, under the current rule, which was promulgated in 2020, employees of Company A can be found to be jointly employed by Company B if Company B possesses and actually exercises direct and immediate control over one or more essential terms or conditions of employment. The rule also specified 8 terms and conditions of employment, including wages, benefits, hours of work, discipline, discharge, supervision, direction of work, and hiring. Under the new proposed rule for 2023, however, even reserved or indirect control over the terms and conditions of employment, even when not exercised, could be enough to render Company B a joint employer. The implications of joint employer status under the National Labor Relations Act are significant, as it could compel 2 companies to assume liability for unfair labor practices among one group of employees. It could also compel both of those companies to engage in collective bargaining with those employees to some extent. On Thursday of this week, the Federal Register included the National Labor Relations Board's agenda for the joint employer final rule, which does appear to reaffirm an August 2023 release date. And that's all I have for this week's edition of the Weekly Recap. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.